Nicole's book, Wakeful Night. I want to do a few thank yous before we get into the meat of the evening. Thank you to Laura McQuain at St. Anne's. She's been incredible to work with. This was very last minute and she's so gung-ho. Books are magic, same thing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Heather Wood in my fiction, especially Heather's our bookseller back there. Tony Montanieri, he is a wonderful ally and friend, and anytime you need something from me, I'll do it. And thank you for being the same way. Same with you, Eve Ensler, you're just really incredible support. And there's a daughter author in-house, Katie Capiello. I want to thank her for being here and for bringing her students. And daughter staffer, Taryn Mann, for all that you do all the time to make sure that these things go okay. So this was on really short notice, and this is a beautiful crowd, so thank you for being here tonight. Dottir Press is a feminist publisher. The mission is that we work to fill the absences in both our history and present culture through storytelling in all forms and for all ages. So children's books, adult books, illustrated books, you name it, I'm very open. All of the books so far have had the theme of healing dissociations and providing space for people to tell the truth about what's happened to them, which is my basic definition of feminism. Dissociation is so pernicious in this American culture, and the dissociation around how our country was founded is part of that, of course. 9 of our first 12 presidents preach about freedom, but own people. And helping white people face their history and ourselves is the purpose of the first book that Dottir published. It's a picture book called Not My Idea, and it's the first children's book about white supremacy and whiteness. If white people are socialized to see themselves as outside of conversations about race, women have been socialized to see themselves as outside of their body, to dissociate from their bodies, to be obsessed and critical, but not necessarily to inhabit them. I think the results, in the Brett Kavanaugh situation, you really see the results, but it's not just right now, it's throughout history. I can't think of anyone who's done more to connect women to their bodies than Eve Ensler. She's a quest for embodied feminism. Tonight, the way that the evening is going to go is I'm first going to introduce Nicole Skibola, who's going to read from her beautiful book. And after that, I'm going to introduce Eve, have her come up to the stage, and there'll be some moderated conversation that I'll moderate, and then we'll open it up to conversation with all of you. So Nicole Skibola is an illustrator, holistic health entrepreneur, and author of Wakeful Night, a structured reflection on loss and illumination. Her book provides a framework to help people battling with cancer. Oops, that word. She's like, don't say battling. I don't even realize how much it's in my brain. People with cancer face, feel, and express their reality by exploring their inner artist. The book is a challenge to our cultural notions of grief, which tends to reward denial and feigning that everything's okay. Nicole's self-exploration led to the creation of both Wakeful Night and her company Cosmic View, an organic line of cannabis-infused salves and tinctures for holistic healing, which she co-founded with her mother, a cancer researcher. Nicole's going to read from Wakeful Night.
And before I start, I just want to thank all of my friends for coming here to support me. I literally would not be here without so many of you. And also, Eve Ensler has been a hero of mine for my entire adult life. I could go on about that, but I'll leave it to some of our conversation that I think will touch on that stuff. And I'm so grateful for her support and her spirit and what she has done for women around the world. So that being said, I'm just going to read a short-ish passage. So most of you know that I was diagnosed with a very rare endometrial cancer when I was 32. It completely caught me off guard, and it caused my life literally exploded. Like everything I had taken for granted was literally decimated, and I had to start all over in a lot of ways, but it made way for some really amazing things to come out of that. My community here is one of them, and this book is another. Okay. All right. I wake from a long, drugged sleep. The dim hospital room is filled with muffled whispers, nervous sighs, hands tending to IVs and monitors. Almost as quickly as I blink into the beige walls and square-paneled ceiling of hospital consciousness, I am overtaken by the quiet shadow, grief. It is immediate, suffocating, and primordial. An image emerges in my mind's eye, body parts seeping down the sterile walls, their fluid collecting in cracks between plastic molding and speckled linoleum floor. I make a drawing of this hospital room. It begins midway up the walls where the lonely pole of a water bag hangs. A long wall-mounted light fixture hovers over an invisible patient bed. The walls are covered with hand-drawn wallpaper, a continuous pattern of uterus, ovaries, and fallopian tubes, distorted backward in perspective on either side wall. At the crease where the walls meet the ceiling, a pool of watery red paint bleeds down each surface until it runs clear toward the bottom row of visible organs. On my 33rd birthday, I tell my boyfriend, I want to be engaged by the end of the year. I am tumbling, out of control, desperate for something to break my fall into the subaquatic horizon. It's too much, he tries to tell me, not so much in words, but by cowardly fading away. It's okay, I tell him, pretending to be an understanding girlfriend. This is her final chapter, the end of Nicole before cancer. With a cancer diagnosis, there are physical losses. Breasts, colons, parts of lungs, and legs. These body parts are considered in clinical terms, and at some point they are labeled excess, diseased tissue to be hastily dumped in a biohazard bin. In reality, each physical piece of self is encoded with story and experience. Each body part has its own memory. I am aware of everything that I've lost with a few snips. I exchanged my life for part of my death. In her 2014 memoir, Ghost Belly, Elizabeth Hyndman recounts her child's stillbirth and how a kind mortician allowed her to take home her son's body so that she could spend time with her baby before he was buried. She was able to grieve as a mother, to say goodbye in a ritualistic way not commonly supported in our society. I think about taking home my own uterus, ovaries, and fallopian tubes. I spend the weeks leading up to the surgery with my hands constantly on my pelvis, willing that sacred energy to remain inside of me, somehow. Those particular organs defined my identity as a woman for my entire conscious life, in pleasure, pain, and possibility. A dear acupuncturist friend teaches me of the yin in Eastern medicine, the female energy that persists. The yin can never be surgically removed, I learned. Just as the energy of a lost infant will never be banished with a physical burial. We are more than the mere sum of our parts. My egg retrieval is, by all accounts, unsuccessful. The doctors overstimulate me, hoping to bolster my fertility in that small window, and the gamble fails. Watching pulses of ovaries and follicles, a dash of one large ova on that tiny screen, is the closest I will ever come to the wonder of spawning life. It is my final childbearing adagio. That little girl I keep seeing, it turns out, is me. Me, soon to be reborn in a way that those of us who have come close to death understand. So I'm just going to read one last little paragraph, and then I'll explain why I'm reading this when I'm done. Cancer, like any loss, is not a standalone event. There are disappointments, secondary losses, and questions that shake all assumptions of identity. I could have limped away wounded, but the spiritual death of heartbreak and betrayal was the passageway to the person writing this introduction. Grief is a deeply tangled, messy creature, and in its folds is the heart's immense capacity to regenerate. The more I draw and write, the more I grasp the deep human desire to share our stories. Stories honor grace and courage in the face of calamity. Outcome is irrelevant. Heroism lies in our capacity to see and feel. So the reason I just wanted to read that before we start this evening is I want to honor those of us who have relatives or people in our lives who we love who have died if they haven't survived cancer. And so part of what I'm doing, and I know Eve talks about this in her book, is let's not think about cancer as a battle or a fight, but let's think about it as a stage or an opportunity for transformation. So I offer my utmost respect and love to everybody in this room who has lost somebody that they love from cancer. And that is no indication of not fighting hard enough or not being a trooper. It's just that some of us, we have shitty genes and don't have the same luck of the draw. So anyway, this is for those people. Anyway, so thank you.
Eve Ensler asked us to not turn away from the violence worldwide that women and all of us routinely endure, and the trauma in our bodies, to let it surface and not continue to have it cause what it's been causing. She's a Tony Award-winning playwright, feminist activist, and performer, best known for her feminist episodic play, The Vagina Monologues. There was a time when we didn't say vagina all the time, and then this play happened, and now we say it constantly. She's the creator both of V-Day, the global activist movement to stop violence against women and girls, and 1 Billion Rising, an activist campaign to end rape and sexual violence on an international scale. She sets her sights really big. I think that's good, Other plays and books include Emotional Creature, The Good Body, and The Body of the World, and the recent Fruit Trilogy, which I saw several times this summer and was embodied by myself right there on the stage. Please welcome Eve Ensler. And the first question I wanted to ask of Nicole is, and I can't believe I don't know this as your editor, but what was the first page you made of the journal?
Oh, this is the time that I get to thank a very dear friend in the audience, Marina Litvinskaya, who's a super talented artist. Do you want to raise your hand, Marina?
Hi.
So Marina and I got together a couple summers ago and started making prints together. And we both have been dealing with our own personal grief in different ways, and kind of inspired each other to make a series of drawings that were sort of like amorphous body parts. So I think that being said, probably the first print that I made, well, some of the artwork was actually borrowed from my illustrated memoir, which is actually the first thing that I made. And then I recycled stuff, because that's what you do when you're an artist, and some things don't take commercially, you just reuse them over and over again. But in terms of the first print that I made, I think it was actually the one that's used in a lot of the publicity, which is probably my favorite one, which is this one. So this is made with a lino cut and India ink, and some of this is this is a carving that Marina and I were sort of dicking around, making different patterns, and yeah, so I think this is the first one, but I do want to I did want to acknowledge Marina, because she totally inspires me as an artist and a human, and you're one of my people.
So Nicole, when we first met, she was talking about where she got the inspiration, and she did mention you right away. So there were 2 people she mentioned, and you were one. And the other book was The Artist's Way, as something that she felt helped her, gave you permission to actually start calling yourself an artist or start making art. And she drew a lot of inspiration from your memoir. Connecting especially with the notion of truly being in your body for the first time after cancer, which is in some ways a revelation for me to hear, because I think of you, I've known you for a long time, and I think of you as being in your body in a way. So can you say what that meant?
Well, hi everyone. I'm really happy to be with everyone this evening and thrilled to be here to celebrate this beautiful book and this amazing new press. Bravo, bravo. It's amazing. I think the return to the body is a very layered experience, and I think if you've been forced to leave your body through violence or through trauma or through rape or through battery or through anything, it takes you a long time to realize you're not in your body. Then it takes you time to realize you're just circling. And then there's the process of coming back into your body. And I think for me, it's been a lifelong journey to get back into my body. You know, I remember when I was performing the vagina monologues on Broadway, one night I was doing the moans, and I actually landed in my vagina. I was like, oh my God, I just landed in my vagina. And I could actually feel it. It was like the spaceship had come down. I was like in. And those of you, I think most women will know what I'm talking about. And I thought, oh my God. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be in now. But it was a visit. You know, it was a visit. And then it took years and years of really beginning to understand how to map that experience. And so I could repeat that. And so I could have the experience be something that was constant and consistent. But I think it's always a deepening, right? We think we've gotten rid of certain neuroses, or we think we've gotten rid of self-hatred, or we think we've gotten rid of name it. And then something shitty happens, or something terrible happens, and all of a sudden you're back in. You know, I think some people were blessed as children, and they got concrete floors. I got bamboo shoots. And so when it rains, you know, the shoots often dissolve. But I think for me, what happened with cancer was that I suddenly realized that I wasn't in my body, that it was like I was approaching, you know, but I wasn't fully in my body. There were ways in which I hadn't yet fully, and I think the process of self-embodiment, the process of becoming fully inside yourself is a lifelong journey, because I think the goal is to become so far inside yourself that you can finally let your body go, right? I mean, that's my vision of what the journey's about. Like, we become so embodied that we're done, and we get to be nothing, which is a very, very wonderful idea, particularly on this day, Brett Kavanaugh. But I think when I woke up after 9 hours of surgery, losing 7 organs and a lot of nodes, and I had tubes and everything coming out of everything in my body, it was amazing, because I was totally body. I didn't have a brain that was functioning. I was just a body. I was like, oh my God, I'm a body. And that was the beginning of that journey, that 9-month journey, that cancer journey, where it really stuck. I really entered my body. And so for that, like you were saying, like, I have enormous gratitude to cancer. Cancer kind of blew that last passageway open, you know, so I could get in. And I'm not glamorizing cancer. Cancer is hideous. But it is an opportunity to go deeply and to turn crisis into revelation.
You both have mentioned loving the poem, the Adrian Rich poem, Diving into the Wreck, and you even illustrated, you refer to it in your intro, and then you illustrated a stanza in the book really beautifully. I think the kind of important line here is, the thing I came for, the wreck and not the story of the wreck, the thing itself and not the myth, which is very profound, and I'm wondering what it means to each of you. Well,
yeah, you know, it's interesting because I first read that poem when I was about 16, and I fell in love with it then, and I've revisited it hundreds of times over the years, which is interesting to me because it was almost a premonition when I look back, since I was so clearly on this path. Like, I had the myth. The myth was I was going to be a lawyer. You know, I was going to be like, make all these career moves and be a businesswoman and have it all figured out, and it was a total myth. And I think, just as Eve was saying, you know, cancer came along, and all of a sudden the myths disappear, and the stories that we've told ourselves don't hold up, because when you're facing your own mortality and when you're facing death, it's just like all the bullshit kind of melts away, and all of a sudden you're just looking at yourself in the mirror, and I was able to see for the first time, like, the essence of who I was, and I believe who I was supposed to become, which was simultaneously totally terrifying. but really incredible at the same time that I had this amazing teacher come along and just, I mean, very rudely and painfully tear away the myth, you know, the myths of career, the myths of love, the myths of material success and benchmarks and milestones and what it means to be a woman, and all these things were suddenly gone. And so it gave me an opportunity to rewrite my story, and to take ownership of that. It was no longer about the stories that had been bestowed upon me by my family, by society. It was about me, which was definitely not, I mean, it was a tough road, and there were many years of struggle, and those of you who have lived in New York with me know that it hasn't been a smooth path, but it brought me here, and Jesus, that is fucking incredible that I'm sitting here with all of you right now, so, yeah.
I have much to add.
Okay. So, if cancer was sort of a reckoning, we're always talking about reckonings now, and has it changed your art? Has it changed your writing?
It's changing everything. You know, I mean, it's changed everything. I lived in the city for 40 years, and I now live in the forest. I moved to the country, and I live with trees. I have these restaurants and take off your thing. I feel like I got put on one of those early on, you know, and I've just been circling, you know, and occasionally somebody takes me off, you know. I got off it. I mean, cancer, I really feel it was like, I don't want to be on that anymore. I don't want to be ruled by outside determinations and an outside energy and an outside motor, because that motor was killing me. You know, I was eviscerating myself and trying to keep up with that motor through stress, through anxiety, through striving, through proving myself, you know. And I realized that's not really what I ever wanted to do with my life. You know, what I wanted to do with my life was work in a world where women were free and safe and empowered in their bodies, and bring in a paradigm where there are no 0.1% of the people who have all the money and the rest of the people who are starving, to end capitalism, to end white supremacy, to end patriarchy, to absolutely worship the mother, the energy force of nature. That's always who I've been. But I got put on that spin around, right? And I was like, what am I doing on this? And cancer just, it went and threw me off. You know, that's what it felt like. And it's completely changed my art, because I just feel now like I'm also older. And I think I'm 65, and when you reach this age, it's fucking fantastic, because you don't give a shit anymore. What are you going to say about me that you haven't said? You call me intense, call me in your face, call me dramatic, call me obscene, call me what? What are you going to do? It's happened. I got it. I got that. Now I can do my work. And I think there's such a freedom and liberation that comes from, I want to go to the next layer of consciousness. I want to explore where we're going. I'm much less interested in where we are now. I want to go, where are we going? What does it look like where we want to be? What does it feel like there? What's the paradigm like? Because if we can't see it, we're never going to get there. And we spend so much of our time reacting and pushing back rather than creating and imagining and envisioning and making a world so incredibly beautiful and so incredibly sensual and sexual and delightful that everyone's like, oh, I don't want this world, I want that, right? And so I think it's made me brave, but I don't feel brave. It's made me myself. And that feels like, I don't know, I spend a lot of time with trees these days, and talking to trees and hugging trees and experiencing trees and loving trees, and they grow and they do amazing things all year long. They don't brag about it. They don't get awards for it. They don't brand themselves. They just do what they do. And I think that's what I feel like cancer's moved me into. It's like, now the trees are shedding. Okay, that's going to be amazing. So.
When you say you're not so interested in where we are right now and all those limits, you're more interested in where we should be or could be. I'm interested in Fruit Trilogy, the last scene. Is that where we could be? So the last scene of Fruit Trilogy, that's the people who've seen it are really not it, is this woman in her bathroom, and she's kind of doing her rubbing what kind of oil? Coconut oil. I know it's called coconut. What kind of oil? She's rubbing coconut oil on her feet, and she's having this ritual, and she kind of channels back in through history and through some really painful things, and then at the end, she's, we're there with her, and then at the end, she's in her bath, and she takes off her bra, and you can feel the audience just being like, oh my God, is she taking off her clothes right now? What's happening? I'm not okay with this, and you feel all this tension in the room, and then she notices it and calls it out, and it's like, don't make me feel, I'm not doing this to turn you on, I'm not doing this for you, just be here with me, witnessing me in my body. And it was really interesting, the first time I saw it, I was so shocked. I had never seen anything like that on stage, and then she gets naked and dances amazingly, and it makes you realize the layers of repression that we all just walk around with.
And I think what that scene is about is that women, we don't know yet how to be in our bodies, be naked without pleasing, without being seduced, without being attacked, without being raped, just to be present in our bodies, because it feels good in our bodies. And that's what patriarchy has done. It's created a world where our own nakedness is either seen as, being seductive, or being performative, or being aggressive, or being, as opposed to just being naked and real and happy and clear and delighted in your body, so that everybody can feel the deliciousness of that. Not to seduce people, not to fuck people, not to have people, but to just be in your body. And Liz, who did that part, was just like one of the most bravest women I've ever met. But she said doing it completely changed her. She's like, she walks around now and she's like, I'm in my body. And it doesn't matter if you like my body or don't like my body. And I think that's where we've got to go. Like, I really believe the revolution begins in our body. Like, the next revolution will be in our bodies, where we're not apologetic and we're not holding back, but we're not performing and we're not doing it for anybody but ourselves,
Seeing her naked too made me realize how hungry I was to see different kinds of bodies naked, because you only generally get to see one type. Nicole, I'm wondering, was there a prompt or a question in your book, or a piece that you were writing in it, anything that's in the book that you were really scared to actually commit to publishing?
God, everything I read today. I think, when I first made this book on my own, and I had a very short introduction, and Jennifer really encouraged me to tell my whole story, and it's really scary. It's really scary standing up in front of people and telling you all that I lost my entire reproductive system. That is not comfortable at all. And I think, there's a lot attached to that, but I think that was definitely the hardest part, or remains the hardest part of what I'm doing right now. But I also believe, just as what Eve was saying, I think it's so important for us to be honest about not only our bodies, but our experiences as humans, and to be honest about our grief. And that's one thing that I loved about her memoir so much, is it's just so brutal. It's talking about poop and surgeries and tubes, and it's just it's not pleasant. And yet it's the truth, and it's what happened, and we will all experience suffering in our lives. And I think I found redemption in that honesty. And it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. It makes, my father, for example, is really uncomfortable with the level of sharing that I do. But I guess you could probably relate to that on some level. But anyway, so that was definitely the hardest thing, was just being super honest about what happened. And then the questions in the book, I think, none of them make me uncomfortable. I think they're all just important questions to ask.
I think they are too, but it made me realize again how suppressed, how many things we think are not supposed to be a part of conversation, how many elements of reality. Mm-hmm. And I remember when the first time I read the page, and it says, "You have cancer," all in caps, and then the next page is, "How did that feel in your body?" To read that, and then you have this opportunity to express. I was really scared to even read it, and scared to internalize that idea that I have a lot of friends who have had cancer, and that's just reality, but do I even, connect to their reality? That was the thing.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about that page too, so my sister is also a cancer survivor, and she's also a psychiatrist, and so she helped me structure many of the questions in this book, and that is one of the questions that I think it says, like, you have cancer. When you heard those words, how did it make you feel? Was it fear of death or pain, fear of not having done enough? And that is one that she was like, you have to ask this, because yes, you can talk about like the beauty that comes out of times of darkness and all this stuff, but the reality is that a lot of people receive a diagnosis and they're just like, oh my God, like I'm gonna die, I'm gonna be in pain, like all these things that are really uncomfortable. So I'm really grateful that she kind of like pushed me to ask those hard questions that, a lot of, especially in the self-help world, it's like there's a lot of glossing over, like, oh, just think of the gratitude and what are you grateful for, and I just think that's such a disservice. Like, when we can be honest about the fact that you're facing death and suffering, like that's when you find transformation, not when you're like beating yourself up for feeling like a piece of shit because, you're dealing with something really awful.
Both of you inspire me on the level of aesthetics. I mean, with V-Day, I remember every event, you kind of had this, you had the colors, and you always had flowers, and people wore pashminas, and there was this whole sort of sense of, not exactly luxury, but just sort of beauty, that you so clearly were saying, feminism doesn't have to be dingy, I don't know. And it was really inspiring to me, because I do love beautiful things, and it makes me happy, not necessarily material objects, but just beauty. And your book, same thing. The journals that you had seen when you were first diagnosed, that were meant to be interactive and helpful, they were, you said, just really tacky. And can you talk a little bit about aesthetics and how it plays into what you're doing?
I mean, totally. I guess a big thing is when you are spending a lot of time in a hospital, it is like the grossest, most depressing place on earth. Like everything is beige, even the tissues. I don't even know. Like, do they find a factory and they're like, give me the shittiest, thinnest, scratchiest tissue for all of these people who are like weeping, like wiping their face 100 times a day with this piece of sandpaper. It's like, we talk about service design in the medical industry and improving patient experience and all this stuff, but when it comes down to it, in terms of like emotional well-being, it's just not there. And I think it sounds superficial, but for me, I just wanted beauty. Like I wanted something beautiful. I wanted to make an object that would enter somebody's life where they're just like, oh my God, like art, and something that has like nice color choices. And I do think that art and aesthetics are so important to our healing and to our personal narrative and storytelling. Obviously, art has been something that has been part of human existence since the earliest cave paintings, and I do think it's tremendously important to our spiritual well-being, and so that was really important to me.
And for you, I'm thinking too about art and theater as a space to talk about some of the most complicated political, but just complicated issues in the world. What is that role? I mean, why is theater the vehicle? I mean, you're a playwright, but why is theater such a powerful vehicle, do you think?
Yeah, I just want to say a few words about beauty.
Sure, great.
Like, I think beauty is everything. I think one of the problems when you drive through America is how unbeautiful it's become. How everything's a strip mall. How everything looks identical. How everything's been corporatized. How everything's been homogenized. And I think what beauty is it's a transmission. It's actually a healing transmission when you stand and you look at beautiful stars, or you look at trees, or you look at, you are healed through that transmission. And in the same way that you are when you look at a beautiful tapestry that a woman's made, or a beautiful painting, and I think it's really, really important we beautify the world. we make beauty everywhere. Because I think that it's also incredibly joining. It's incredibly unifying. It brings people together. It makes people feel happy. It makes your soul open. It brings you ecstasy. It brings you pleasure. And I think we're so conditioned now in America. It's to work and work and work and work and strive and make money. And the whole culture is, we're just running past all the things that could be giving us pleasure. I really believe that we're supposed to be here in pleasure. Like that if you look at what the Great Mother created, everything is about pleasure. Whether it's touch, whether it's water, whether it's sun, everything is just so pleasurable. And yet, all of us we're on our phones, which is not pleasurable. I'm sorry, there's nothing about the iPhone that is pleasurable. It's agony. But we're all attached to it. And I think to open up a world of beauty and pleasure is so critical right now. But I also think theater, I just think theater is the most revolutionary art form. I do. And I think it is the place where revolutions can be born, and revolutionary feelings can happen, because it's actually being created between people on a stage and an audience. It's happening in the present tense, and it's live, and it's strangers who come together, and then suddenly they're unified into one collective mass in the dark. And I also think you can say things and do things that you can't do through ideology, or you can't do through a journalistic piece, or you can break binaries, you can open up your heart, you can surprise, you can be together in a sacred space where ritualistic and powerful things are going on. And I can't tell you how deeply I believe in the theater, particularly right now when we've lost. And one of the reasons I really don't like New York anymore, and I'm sorry to say it, I've lived here 40 years, but I fell out of love. I did. You know, when you wake up in the morning and you look at the person you're with, and you suddenly don't like their smell, and you don't like the way they look, and you don't like what they're saying, and you don't like how loud they are. That's what happened to me in New York after 40 years. But one of the reasons is no one looks at each other. When I grew up in this city, like, we picked up each other on the streets all the time. We would look at somebody and be like, yes, okay. And because everyone was connected and feeling each other, and no one looks up. And that loss just feels heartbreaking to me, you know what I mean? And I think theater's the one place where we look up, where we look out, where we look at each other, where we're sitting next to someone who's suddenly sobbing by us and we're holding their hands. And it's real, and it's happening in present real time.
Oh, I so agree. And you're kind of changed a little or a lot together too. And you also became saying this the other day, you can't minimize, like something happens on stage and you're like uncomfortable with it, you can't be like, I'm gonna minimize that. Or it's just happening. Yeah, it's just happening in front of you. I wanted to offer Nicole an opportunity to ask Eve a question, and Eve an opportunity to ask Nicole if they want, and then open it up to the audience. I know, putting you on the spot a little bit. I'm sure there's burning things you've been wanting to ask, and now they've left your head.
How about Eve ask me a question first?
Tell us what you've learned about cannabis.
Oh, great question. Okay, so yeah, Jennifer mentioned this. I have a cannabis company with my mom in California called Cosmic View. And I actually didn't use cannabis as I was being treated. I guess part of it is I didn't receive chemo, and I also was treated here, and people were just not like hip to the game. But it is something that I think is absolutely amazing. And so my mother and my mom she's a UC Berkeley scientist, and she makes all of our formulations. We make tinctures and topicals. And I just think cannabis is one example of this amazing plant medicine that we have that is obviously, as we've all heard, effective against inflammation, and it has anti-proliferative properties, so it's effective against certain lines of cancer cells, it's calming, it's a pain reliever. But I think one of the most amazing things about cannabis is that it's an incredible tool for mindfulness. So I think cannabis is, speaking of coming back into your body, it's so amazing to me how I feel like I mean, especially starting a company and having this book and moving across the country, and just my mind is really crazy. And being able to consume a substance and then be able to go through the world in this highly sensory way, which is like, oh, I hear the ocean and I'm like touching tree bark, and I don't know, it's an amazing way to just bring you back to the present moment. And it doesn't have to be in a way where you're like taking a bong rip and you're like, you know, some crazy stoner. It could just be like something very subtle that that can be used very mindfully as a tool. And I am really happy that California has passed adult use laws, and I hope that New York follows soon. I think it is also a social justice issue. I mean, the other thing I feel obligated to mention is that there's, you know, especially now in the age of legalization, there's a lot of wealthy white people who can order like designer joints to be delivered to their door, but we still have a tremendous number of people of color mainly who are rotting in jail for minor marijuana offenses. And so as legalization continues to spread across the country, I hope that that there is also an accompanying movement, and there is certainly one in California, around what we call social equity in the industry, to make sure we're not leaving people behind, both people who have been incarcerated unjustly, in my opinion, but also people who, you know, were at the front lines of cannabis, the cultivators and the farmers and the people who really have been devoting their lives to making medicine for a really long time. So I'm super passionate about it. If anybody wants to talk to me about cannabis, I'd be happy to tell you. I also have my very talented package designer over here. Part of what we're doing with Cosmic View is we're normalizing cannabis. So Basha, who's super talented, helped us make a package that looks like any other beauty product that you might want to have on your night table. That's the amazing thing about cannabis now, is that it's not like an icky, weird, stonery experience, like, you know,
tie-dye. Like,
yeah, it's like, it's really come a long way. I love tie-dye, for the record.
Don't you be denigrating my hippie friend.
Do you want to ask Eve a question, or we can open up too?
Yeah, no, I definitely want to ask Eve a question. Oh yes, here's the question I want to ask. So, I first saw The Good Body, which is one of Eve's productions, when I was 22. My mom took me and my sister to see it in San Francisco. And I had this really visceral reaction. Like, I remember watching it, my mom and my sister were like really into it, and I was hysterical. Like, I was weeping watching this, and I felt, it was so confusing. It was like, I didn't know why I was so upset, but I was. It was actually like very disturbing. Not in any way. I obviously loved the production, but it really spoke to me on such a deep level about the trauma that I carried in my body. You know, both from a relationship that I had recently gotten out of, but also just realizing as a woman, as a young woman, how much my body had been imbued with, I mean, yeah, I guess it's, for lack of a better word, the patriarchy, and this idea that I was expected to act a certain way, or to be a sexual being in a certain way, or to hate my body in a certain way. And something that I thought was really amazing in Eve's memoir is she talks about the trauma that women hold in their bodies, and also has some theories of her own about how her trauma was transmuted into cancer. And I would love to hear you, and I guess I will preface this with anybody who has had cancer, like, I have my own hypotheses about sort of the karma of my own illness, and I think it's a very personal thing. And so when I ask this question, I am in no way implying that anybody like brings on their own cancer, anything like that. So that's just the preface to this question. It's a very personal question. But I would just like to know more about your feelings about trauma and how women embody trauma, and how that is tied to your experience with your cancer.
Well, you know, all of us have cancer cells in our body, right? They all live there. Just in the same way that there is a schizophrenic cell that happens in schizophrenics that's embedded in the brain, but it might not be catalyzed in a lifetime unless the child experiences trauma, right? So that schizophrenia gets catalyzed by the environment. I believe, and this is just my own belief, that one day we won't even call cancer cancer, we'll just call it trauma, and we'll be treating the whole person holistically, looking at how trauma has happened to them from psychologically, emotionally, physically, in every single respect. And I'll tell you something really interesting. I was just in the Congo because we have a wonderful, extraordinary place that we're in partnership with called the City of Joy, which is the most holy place I've ever been. It's a sanctuary for a revolutionary center for women who've been tortured in the Congolese War and sexually raped and abused in ways one can't even articulate in public because it's re-traumatizing. But I've really been trying since I had cancer to get somebody to do a study where they look at the correlation between women who have been raped and sexually assaulted and reproductive cancers. Because I know in my body that there's a correlation. I just know this to be, you know those things you just know to be true and you just know it's true. So I met with 3 Congolese doctors who were embarked on this study when I was there last time, and now we're going to support them and to really develop this so they can create a paper. But at our City of Joy, there are 90 women in every session, and they came to do a test on our women, and they were all from 14 to 30. And out of 60 women who had been sexually traumatized, 29 of them had reproductive cancers. 29. Okay? Now, I know in my heart that when your body is traumatized, when your cells are ripped apart, when you're invaded, when you're, you know, when something happens, when you're eviscerated in your body, things enter you and things get into you that you don't want inside you. And things happen inside you that you don't understand. Splinterings occur and an inability to protect yourself. You suddenly realize that you have no ability to protect yourself. And I think cancer happens when the body can't protect itself from those cells. Those cells start masquerading as they look like normal cells, and they get in. It's sort of way don't get me started. It's in sort of way this whole regime has done it, like appealing to the people like we're one of you, we're one of you, we're one of you, and then they get in and they just take over the whole system and destroy everything around them. It's really very much what cancer cells do. So if your body has been weakened, and if your immune system has been compromised, at some point in your childhood or in your young adulthood or in your life, your ability to first recognize those cells is diminished, and then your capacity to protect yourself. And I think, for me, I know that my own being raped and being sexually assaulted by my father and then being battered by my father for years was waiting to be it was just there. And then over the years of listening to thousands of stories, it was growing. And then there was an event that catalyzed it. There was a story that catalyzed it. I knew when I was hearing that story it was too much. It had shattered something. And I don't think we can, I think what we've been brought up to believe in this patriarchal world is everything's siloed. We have your head here, we have your body here. Even when they did research on chemo, with the impact on the body, they did the whole body, but they forgot to do the brain, right? So for years, no one knew what chemo was doing to the brain because the brain isn't considered part of the body, right? Where it's all pieced and siloed up, right, and fragmented. And I think that's how we treat patients too. We don't say that the way someone touches you or the way a speculum, instrument enters you or the way a doctor speaks to you has an impact. Well, of course it does. It can be the matter of life and death, So I think all of that is part of how we get sick and also how we get well.
Well, that touching and connecting. It reminds me of when we were in Fargo last week, and Greg Dans, who owns Ambrose, had two cancer diagnoses over the summer, and really has been going through hell. And he said that the doctors, there was only one doctor that would touch him when he would talk to him, and it made such a difference in terms of how he received the information and also the treatment. So yeah, I think that we're siloed, we're compartmentalized, we need to get off our phones clearly, and your work for both of you heals dissociation, and I'm grateful for it. I want to open it up to questions from the audience or conversation from the audience at this point, if anyone has anything. Yes.
I would like to hear how printing or writing helps you to heal through these things.
So the question is, she would like to hear how the practice of printing or writing helps one heal.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I think it's the only way that I knew how to heal. I mean, I am a huge, like, all my friends know that I've got like all the tips on what you should be eating and doing for your body, and I'm like a doer. I'm one of those people who it's like I have my list and I go through it, and I have read a lot of self-help books over the years. I was in tons of therapy, for a long time, but especially when I was sick. And I think I was just completely unable to touch something that was deeper than I was able to express in words or in in anything that I had. And I had no language to communicate what I was going through. I think as humans, and in many ways, like our verbal language or written prose don't capture the full experience of the human condition. At least it didn't for me. And so for me, accessing drawing and writing in different forms was a way for me to tell my story in like this very multifaceted way that was able to capture the depth of just the sorrow that I was experiencing. And that's why I think things like, art forms like poetry or music or theater or, visual art, it's just, they move us on this level that gets us out of our brain and into our hearts. And once I was able to just be in my heart and be in the sorrow and the darkness of what I was going through, and to be able to sit with that, that is when the healing began. And so I think that is the power of personal storytelling, is also this idea that we have so much grace, and whether you live or die, there's like the ability to capture grace through different art forms. I just think is so beautiful and so moving, and to sit in that place, I just think is incredibly powerful.
Is there something to the making of that's healing about, like actually creating something or making or doing something material like that?
I mean, yeah, I think first of all, I think the big thing is just getting out of your head, and so for me, drawing was a way where I wasn't, like, of course I would think about a composition or something, but it's just a different sensory experience. And I don't think that there's like one art form that's better than another. I think that everybody in here has their own form of creative expression, whether it's like, maybe it's making a beautiful meal, or maybe it's writing a song, or, but yeah, I think it was literally like, I just stopped up here. Like all the like, you should be doing this or feeling this, I was just able to tap into something deeper that I was never able to articulate in another way. If that makes sense.
Yes.
I'm curious about how your cancer journey has impacted your relationship with others, and more specifically, how you see others distribute, like what was helpful, what wasn't helpful, what felt good, what didn't.
So So the question is how the cancer journey affected interpersonal relationships, and in particular, say the last part again. How people treated you. Okay.
You know, this is going to sound really strange, but I knew at the very beginning after my surgery, when I got back to New York, that anybody around me who felt toxic, I couldn't be part of it. Like I just knew I was going to shed relationships, and it was not hard at all, because I knew I had to protect my body. Like I knew that anything that was coming into me at that point that wasn't clean and healthy and well could not be coming into me. And the people in my life who were that surrounded me with so much love, it was embarrassing. You know, I used to say, like, if I die, it's going to be embarrassing. Because, like, you know, and I think it was great in a way, because, you know, when a friend of mine got diagnosed with blood cancer, she said, "What would you tell me?" And I said, "Make sure there are no people in your life that do not have your best interests. Make sure there are no people in your life who don't cherish you and celebrate you and appreciate you, and who aren't secretly having other agendas. Because that's the stuff that goes into you. That's the stuff that's toxic." And, you know, I pretty much, in that period of time, lived in a state of bliss. Because all the people who were around me, I don't know, I mean, Tony is here. In the book, he's a character of Toast, but he was a love angel. He was just a love angel. He was. And he filtered out all the people who weren't. Do you know what I mean? So it was like, "No, I don't think you're coming into the house." You know, he would just pick up reasons why people wanted to be there that weren't necessarily appropriate. You know, and I think you know when you're sick, don't you? When the vibration is wrong, it's wrong. You just have to take care of your body, you know?
Yeah, I think that the one big thing that I would add is everybody, for me, like everybody had an opinion about, not everybody, a lot of people had an opinion about what I should do. And especially as somebody who, like, I've always been really into holistic health and sort of more like Eastern medicine. And I had some people in my life who kind of gave me shit for my treatment decision. And when my sister was 17, she had Hodgkin's disease and she went through chemotherapy. And this woman said to her, "I can't believe your mother let you get chemotherapy." And I just think, for me, the biggest takeaway is, like, our health and our bodies is so personal. And whatever somebody wants to do with their treatment decision, like whatever they want to do, my lesson, you know, the biggest thing for me is just to honor people's own personal journey with their health. And I think there's a lot of shame in our culture around cancer and where it comes from, and
Tons of blame. People
bring
always
it
say,
on.
"Yeah, what did they blah blah blah?"
Yeah, or like, you know, I mean, so it's just, yeah, I think it's, you know, as Eve said, like, there's this, like, weird, it's like this time where people, like, all the weirdness that some people have, it just gets, like, imposed, like, you're suddenly this mirror for people's weirdness.
A woman came up to me on the street. Obviously, she had heard I had cancer, and she was like, "How are you?" "How are you?" And I thought, I'm not dead yet. Because the feeling was like she was almost willing me into my death, right? You know, because either she wanted me dead or she was projecting her own fear onto me. And I knew, I don't know about you, I could not be around anyone who didn't think I was going to live. Like, if people were bringing fear into my space or bringing, you know, like, it was like, go away. Like, I need all the energy I had right now that I'm going to live, and I'm going to move through this. It's going to be painful, it's going to be hard, but you need to believe I can do this. And I just want to echo what she's saying about treatment. You know, when you're sick, I think you get very, very intuitive, because a lot of walls come down. Because suddenly you're facing your potential end. So it's like, everything just goes. It's like, wow, that's going, that's. And you get very intuitive. And you know what you can do and you know what you shouldn't do. And people talk you out of that. And I remember at the very end stage of my treatment, my doctors came in and they said, we really think you should radiate your vagina. Can you imagine? And I actually said, do you know who you're talking to? And I said, so what would it do? What would it do to radiate my vagina? Well, we don't know. I said, okay, so have you had success with this kind of cancer with people who have radiated their vaginas? Well, we don't know. I said, okay, so tell me what the consequences of me radiating my vagina would be. Well, you will have diarrhea for the rest of your life, you'll probably never have sex again. And it just went, and I went, are you fucking kidding me? You are telling me that you don't know what radiation will do. And I said, no way are you going to radiate my vagina. It's just not happening. You're not radiating my vagina. And there was huge kind of medical balking at that. But at the end, I made the right decision because I knew in my being no one was going to radiate my vagina. It just couldn't happen. It just couldn't happen in this lifetime. So I think you know things that people are suggesting to you that just feel wrong. And for some people, chemo doesn't feel wrong. Do you know what I mean? Some people feel right. And sometimes it's just fear. And you also got to look at what is your fear and what is your intuition. You know?
Yes.
Sort of piggybacking off of that question, and maybe elaborating on what you guys were just speaking to, I'm wondering if you talked a little bit about like the lack of beauty in a hospital environment and how much you craved that while you were there. And you mentioned the lack of touch in an environment like that. I'm wondering if you could speak to either an experience that you had or something that you craved from either the caregivers in that space, the professional caregivers, or from family members or friends visiting the bedside.
The question is, what was something that either of them craved in terms of caregiving from professional caregivers or family members?
Or God.
Or God.
I'll go first. So I think for me, the most, it's interesting because, so I was treated with Sloan Kettering, and I know you had a very bad Sloan Kettering experience. So I'll just speak about my good Sloan Kettering experience. But I literally thought I had fibroid. I went in to get my post-surgical checkup and sat down, and the doctor, with the worst bedside manner, not a Sloan Kettering. But anyway, he basically was like, oh yeah, sorry, oops, it was a tumor and we shredded it inside of your body. And we're gonna bring in this oncologist, and the oncologist sits there and she's like, yeah, we scheduled you for surgery in a week. In a week you're getting, your uterus, your ovaries, everything's coming out. And my first question was, can I do an egg retrieval? And she was just like, no, absolutely not. And I think the interesting thing for me is I ended up at Sloan Kettering and I really loved my surgeon, and I think the approach that I really liked that she took and my doctors took there was they knew that my egg retrieval was a risk for me, that I should not be injecting hormones into my body having an estrogen positive cancer, but they knew that it was important for me to do. And I am so grateful. In the end, it was not a successful undertaking, but I'm so grateful that I had a doctor who was able to zoom out and be like, this is a young woman and a human, not just a body and a statistic. And that was just a really wonderful example of doing something that didn't necessarily make the most medical sense, but it was so important for me and my emotional state.
Well, there's actually a scan in my book about this. The chapter's called Dr. Handsome, and when I was treated at the Mayo Clinic, and I can't recommend it highly enough. It's the closest thing we have to socialized medicine in this country, and it's absolutely. It's not beautiful by any means, but it is beautiful in spirit. And I was like literally in this exam where I was down, lying on the table with my underpants down, and my ass exposed, lying there thinking this is the end of the world. I was sweating. No one knew how far the cancer had spread. People thought it was in all my organs. I was in a nightmare, right? And the most handsome doctor in the world walks into the room, and I'm like, okay, this is a double nightmare now. Because like, now I'm exposed, and I was just like, oh my God, the sweat. And he literally walked from one side of the table to the other, looked me in the face, and he said, Eve, before we begin, I want you to know I'm really aware of all you've done in this world for women, and I'm going to do my very best to take care of you. And I'm telling you, it changed everything. From that point on, I said, that dude's going to save my life. I'm going to get better. Everything turned around. It was like I was seen. Somebody saw me as a human being with a history, with a story, with a life, you know, and I can't, and you know, I talk all the time to doctors, and I try to explain that it's not, even that we call it bedside manner, Mr. Lucas, it's humanity. It's humanity. It's like we're in this together. You're not operating on me as a body separated from my being. How you talk to people, how you touch people, how you treat people, how you move into people will determine the outcome, if they survive or not. And it's no less than that. You can do the best surgery in the world, but if you're brutal in the way you touch people, if you're mean, if you're cold, your patient will have to overcome that to get better.
Well, and there's actually a study that my mom told me about that came out recently that does show that patients with doctors who have better, you know, bedside manner actually have better health outcomes. So it is a real.
It's interesting because it's not a part of med school. I mean, it isn't.
Nicole, it's so great to see you well and strong and expressing yourself. We haven't seen each other for a number of years, but of course you made it a work. Of course you turned your experience into something that other people can now share and pass on. So thank you. My question, the last time we saw each other was at a meditation retreat, was at a Buddhist retreat. Talking about being in our bodies, was meditation any part of having a role in your healing, in your focusing now business, expressing yourself?
Such a good question, Peter. Thank you for asking. Yeah, so actually, well, the first place I went after a really weird impulse buy where I went to Bloomingdale's and bought boots right after I was diagnosed. I actually went to my temple in Borum Hill, which is this really beautiful Zen temple. And I sat, which it was actually a terrible idea because I was just sitting there weeping, but I knew that I had to go there. And the Sangha that I have been a part of for the past few years has been really amazing. And I think Buddhism has so many important lessons about suffering. And so for me, really being interested in exploring grief, it sounds so morbid, but I think it is so beautiful, and Buddhism really teaches us to sit with our suffering, and that when we can do that, we find, you know, there's room for grace in that. And so meditation has definitely been a really big part of my life, not only in terms of developing and cultivating a better understanding of my own experience, my own suffering, but also being able to be present with my suffering. So that's really what this book is about. It's about encouraging people to take space to be present with the darkness in our lives. Or, you know, we have this whole culture around love and light and chasing the light, but really, like, there's yin and there's yang, there's light and there's dark, and I think finding that balance and understanding that balance is such an important part of being alive and really appreciating the fact that we're going to die, and therefore, what can we really cherish now?
Let's have one more question and then we're going to wrap up. Katie.
So I guess my question has to do more with touching upon being in our bodies and how do we most organically and wholly be in our bodies given the moment that we're in right now, and I spend the majority of my time with teenage girls. And I find it to be a very rattling moment for them and for all of us. And how do we encourage them to still stay present and enjoy their bodies when it's being threatened every minute?
Really good question. I would say we need to dance all the time. We need to practice rage. And I really feel like as women we don't have outlets for our rage.
Yes.
So I would strongly suggest getting plastic bags and big pillows where you just rage and beat it a few times a day, particularly right now, because I think all of us are having an enormous amount of rage. And then I think really doing beautiful, beautiful self-care with your body. Oiling your body, bathing your body, being kind to your body, wrapping your body in things that feel soft and comforting, those kind of rituals I think are really, really important. And I think having beautiful sex, having sensuous, beautiful, kind, loving touch that's deepening, touch that's connected. I think sex is, Marvin Gaye said it, it's sexual healing. It's healing. And I think what we have to do is create a counter body narrative right now to the narrative they're creating, which is how do we shield each other, how do we see each other, how do we protect each other, how do we feel into each other while they're shoving themselves through us. They're using the language of that. We're just going to shove this through. We're just going to ram this through. It's the language of rape. It's the language of disassociation. It's the language of I don't care what's in my way. We have to say that's not our language. That's not how we behave. We're going to be more sensitive. We're going to be more in tune. We're going to make sure marginalized people aren't on the outside. We're going to make sure people who are suffering, we're paying attention to their suffering.
So tonight, everybody go home, put on Marvin Gaye, have sex, dance, and tomorrow morning when the news comes on, you can beat a pillow with whatever's handy.
Hopefully not. Hopefully tonight there's going to be a divine intervention.
Yeah.
We're going to change things.
Yeah, maybe that will happen.
It's not over yet.
That's right.
Send your energy to these people that they get the cosmic download that they cannot do this,
Thank you so much, everyone.